I can try to talk in English. You can hear the French. Yes, thank you. Je vais commencer le webinaire. Nous attendons une minute seulement et après nous commençons avec toutes les présentations. Merci.
Julia, you'll want me to speak slowly or since there's interpretation?
Speak as you feel free to speak.
Yeah, because sometimes I go very fast.
Don't worry.
I'm recovering from a cold. Thank you. It has taken too long. I got some of the, when they were doing demonstrations, I live near State House. So some of the, when they were, the tear gas. So.
Thank you everyone for joining in. I'm now waiting some time to allow everybody to enter the room, and then we will start. I will also try to present you some of the rules of information to manage this webinar together. So I'm first of all Julia Bordin, Advocacy Officer at Passy International, and I'm very happy that you are all here with us, joining the webinar, but also for our speakers to be here. You will see them here now, then we'll disappear for some times, and then they will appear again to present. Concerning the internal rules for the webinar, there is translation that is available for the webinar in English and French. In case you don't know how to put the translation on, I'm gonna show you how to do it with a simple slide. So as you can see here, there are a few instructions for you to follow in order to start the interpretation. We are also recording this meeting. So afterwards, you will have also the possibility to listen to it again. And this recording will also be available in both English and French. We are also having a live stream in place on Facebook. So in case you know people that didn't register, don't have the link or are unable to access, it's also available for them on our Facebook page at Christi International Facebook page. I will, for now, give you some time to do the setup. We will also have a Q&A session after the panel. So today we're going to have not only the participation of esteemed speakers to give a bit of their reflections and insight, but we will have also a full panel session. During this panel session, you will have the opportunity to hear the voices from the ground. And there will be also the possibility to ask questions through a Q&A session. In the Q&A, I kindly ask you to use always a kind and gentle language, a very respectful language for everybody. Try to ask as less and focused questions as possible, because we would really love to be able to answer to all your questions. So if you have multiple ones, try at least to concise them in one or two. And in case you have even more and we are unable to answer them, we will try to answer them afterwards, after the webinar. Everything that will be shared today will be also available to you. So presentations, materials that we're going to share with you, you will also receive it in the next weeks. So I will stop sharing the screen now. And I kindly give the word to Marta Ines Romero, Secretary General of Christi International, for an introduction to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Julia. Welcome to the webinar, Towards Sustainable Peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Local and Regional Strategies in Response to the Security Crisis, jointly organized by Passy International with our friends at the Europe Central Africa Network, EurAc. My name is Marta Ines Romero, Passy Secretary General. After more than 2 decades of widespread violence and halting peace efforts, peace continues to prove elusive in the eastern region of DRC. Displacement, violence, fear continues. We should ask why those efforts by politicians, accompanied by the United Nations, have not given any evidence to nurture a sustained peace environment for the people of the DRC. Today, we have invited experts who will share their analysis on ways to contribute from the civil society organizations and the churches to tackle with the crisis and to build the basis of a reconciled country. Thanks to Mr. Godefroid Marhegane, coordinator of CADRE and Passy International board member. To Sister Angèle GAPIO ASSINIRO, Caritas coordinator of the Bunia Diocese. To Father Eric NSENGA, spokesman and general secretary of the Church of Christ in Congo. And to Passy MUBALAMA, executive director of AIDPROFEN, for accepting this invitation. Passy International is a Catholic peace movement with diverse programs, campaigns, and initiatives promoting processes of change. In the DRC, we have accompanied processes of strengthening capacities and promoting leadership from our 4 dimensions of change approach: personal, relational, cultural, and structural. Learning about the theory and practice of nonviolent action and conflict transformation has helped young people and religious congregations to start facilitating ways for social cohesion in their families and communities. Peace clubs were created to bring together people, young people, to apply nonviolent methodologies. Entrepreneurship was a core component of the training project, offering young people a pathway to economic opportunities. We believe, with our Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, that vicious cycles of violence can be broken through active nonviolence and peace building. The project allowed young people to choose and adopt peaceful ways to live and avoid being attracted by militias and gangs in the region. The Nonviolent Communication Program seeks to avoiding fake news and misinformation instrumental in instigating rebel wars and ethnic conflicts. Participants are building coexistent and active opposition to violence. By identifying cultural patterns on sexual abuse and ways to heal women, children, and girls, it has been crucial to strengthening religious sisters in their work of caring and healing. We have accompanied also efforts to promote a fruitful dialogue and collective action by the Great Lakes Bishops Association, EurAc. We believe in the capacity of faith leaders to speak up on behalf of the victims of this unfair violence. The Church's involvement in the DRC is substantial, providing nonviolent alternatives and humanitarian aid through a wide-reaching network encompassing hospitals and schools and economic initiatives such as farms and shops. It is a big voice of influence. The people of DRC are fatigued by the long absence of peace and the many attempts to restore it. It is key that any response to building a lasting peace in the DRC should be led by its peaceful Congolese people, civil society organizations, faith leaders, grassroots communities, all of them influencing their politicians for a real way to overcome violence based in power, land, and mineral resources, for disarmament and to feel safety in their land. From the international stakeholders' side, peace movements as Pax Christi International and networks at EurAc should continue supporting all efforts promoted by them, the Congolese, from our solidarity and compassion, and also from our advocacy capacity towards the European Union, the United Nations, the African Union, and to the global North powers to explore innovative approaches for peace and for the respect of human rights in the DRC. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Marhegane, for these welcoming words. And I would like now to leave the floor to Sister Wamuyo, co-president of Pax Christi International, for some words of reflection.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Julia. I chose to use a reflection because often we can be divorced from a situation. So I want to move us to the heart level so that we journey with the people in DRC Congo. So the reflection on the Democratic Republic of Congo. Reflecting on the current situation of the DRC, I am pained, I'm challenged, and also full of hope of a DRC that will emerge more peaceful, just, and whose people's blood that have been shed and that covers the diamonds of the land will not be in vain. That through this, as the Master said, that Jesus speaks about, will sprout and grow into a mighty tree where birds will come and settle on. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream of a DRC where weapons will no longer be a choice to resolving conflicts, but the people will go back to their African wisdom and sit down, often under a tree, to dialogue, to call their people to harmony, to community, Ubuntu, forgiveness, and reconciliation, where the wisdom of the old will inform the children and the youth through mentorship. I'm grateful that today we are here to dialogue using peaceful means. We are here to share ideas on how best we can restore our beautiful home, the DRC, and all its people. The current reality of our situation in the DRC, where just a few days ago, during the 64th anniversary of the independence of the DRC from Belgian colony, saw the M23 militia, supported by the RDF, capture the south of Lubero, which includes Kayabayonga, Kianya, Kirumba, and other neighboring villages, and their progression towards the capital of this same Lubero territory, leading to displacement and confusion and intimidation among the population. Equally, the massacre of more than 30 finalist students at the State Examination Center in Nfumadufas in Masisi territory on the last day of these exams. As we reflect on these painful realities in the DRC, let us lay a foundation for these discussions. Please, I invite you to come with me. I invite us, as we engage in these discussions, to listen to the cries of the DRC mothers that bring forth life and breastfeed children, some who have to die before they can celebrate the 5th birthday, whose lives are violated and destroyed when rape is widely used as a weapon of war. I invite us to listen and watch mothers and fathers whose sons and daughters' potential and dreams for a new DRC are cut short. Others forced to engage in militia activities and go against the values and norms they have invested in. For example, respect for all life, respect for elders, harmony, community living, care, sharing with all, especially the poor. To listen and watch the children cry for lack of care, food, medical attention, denial of warmth and security, as the only voice of wonder are the guns, shots, and bullets. And the games left is running to flee with their parents to unknown destination. I invite us to listen and watch the environment, our common home, a land of beauty, the rainforest, endowed with minerals, with the gorillas and other creatures, destroyed through extractive industries, succumbing to greed, especially of the international communities and multinationals. The earth that is now soaked with blood of the innocent. It is in this place, in this space, that I invite us today to discuss and share on this, our beloved country, the DRC. When will the guns be silenced? When will these useless, violent wars cease, that the people of the DRC enjoy their inalienable right to life, freedom, justice, and peace? When will we learn from experience that violence only begets violence? When will we give a chance to the new ways of addressing the crisis in the DRC that some of the youth in the DRC and other African countries, such as my own Kenya, have embraced, the way of active nonviolence as a way to peace, a way of being and doing. The local, such as the African Union, the United Nations, the civil society, the church, join hands to liberate the DRC and other African countries entrapped and paralyzed by these intractable violent conflicts, wars that are being fought piecemeal, as Pope Francis notes. As we discuss on sustainable peace in the DRC, local and regional strategies in response to the challenges, the DRC complex security crisis, let us have this in mind. Thank you. Peace. Shalom.
Thank you very much, Sister Bomoyo, for these insightful words that I believe resonate with all of us, and they indeed, together, combined with those of Martinez, are actually preparing the floor for opening the discussion and the conversation. So we had the possibility to reflect, to gather, to start reunited this conversation, and now we go into much details with the voices from the ground, and hopefully with this spirit united together, we can come out with a fruitful result after this webinar. So thank you very much again to both of you. I will now leave the floor to Megan Rodriguez, our colleague from EurAc, to open and moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Before introducing the panel, let me tell you that we are going to have a 20-minute question and answer session. So feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A function so that our speakers can answer later. First, I'd like to start by introducing our panelists for today in the order in which they speak. We have Reverend NSENGA, Secretary General of the Church of Christ in Congo, in charge of the Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation Commission, and spokesman for the Church. He's also the National Coordinator of the Consortium of Religious Denominations and Civil Society for Transitional Justice in DRC. Then we're going to have Mr. Marhegane, who is the coordinator of the Comité d'appui au développement rural endogène, an NGO based in Goma, which aims at tackling the root causes of poverty and ensure socio-economic development by initiating community development projects. He has solid experience in the humanitarian field. Then we have Sister Angèle GAPIO ASSINIRO, project coordinator with Caritas Development in the Diocese of Bunia. She has been involved in different projects aiming at raising awareness of peace building and peaceful cohabitation and on non-violent communication. And finally, we will end with Mrs. Passy MUBALAMA, a pro-democracy and women's rights activist based in Goma, in DRC, having witnessed at first hand the consequences of repeated conflicts and wars, especially for women. She decided in 2011 to found AIDPROFEN, a non-profit organization that campaigns for women's rights in the DRC. Welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for being here today and for taking the time to share your expertise and your knowledge of the situation with us. I'm sure that our participants are looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Without further ado, I propose that we begin our discussions with Reverend NSENGA. Sister Wamuyo has already given us a good overview of the security crisis and its dramatic consequences for the population. And she's also talked about some ways to exit the crisis. We've witnessed a few things which are not leading to our optimism. Attacks on convoys and humanitarian workers, a resumption of clashes despite the 2-week truce announced a few days earlier. In this very difficult framework, the new government announced in May has begun its work. And we can imagine that one of its main tasks will be to bring peace back to the east of the country. As the Secretary General of the ECC, could you shed some light on these aspects? And what is the viewpoint of the Church regarding this, and what can the Church do to bring back peace and stability to the region?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Megan. First and foremost, I would like to speak about the peace and security situation in the country, and we should address the backdrop of the 2023 elections, because this paved the way for the mapping of the current situation. On the one hand, we've had internal tensions within the majority when it comes to the distribution of tasks, and we know that, of course, the government had to deal with what had been implemented in the past by the previous government. So we know that there is a major mistrust vis-à-vis large political parties, and some political expectations have not been met by the key interlocutors. On the other hand, we have those who are disappointed about the outcome of the elections, and of course they are rejecting the legitimacy of this government. So we face a dual reality, but in spite of all those tensions, the government was put in place. So what is the current security agenda? I think that it's important to recall the position adopted, not necessarily by the current regime, but the position of the military regime. And of course, this is jeopardizing the way we can address the current situation. To be very clear, the remaining option now on the table has to take into account the agreement with Rwanda and Nairobi, but there are so many frustrations in the region of the Great Lakes. There had been some agreements with the EAC, so there are many frustrations, and this did not facilitate the peaceful and ideological process. So the remaining option is the military one, and of course there's a lot to say. We have really to think about the reality on the field, frustrations, what the army is doing, the costs of war. So today we have to take into account the fact that the government is also choosing the diplomatic way, but in a very shy way. We have seen many centers of frustrations linked to the actions of the MONUSCO. We know that we see that the United Nations are unable to condemn Rwanda. There are many frustrations. So we see that all those frustrations at a continental level, at sub-regional level, are still there. And of course, it does not make the diplomatic solution easy to take. So we face several types of realities internally. Then the second question, what is the church doing? Within the church, we still have two options. The first one would be to harmonize the analysis of the deep root causes of this situation. Of course, we know that we've had many issues with Rwanda, but this situation is much larger. So it is important to sit down at the table and to analyze the deep root causes leading to this crisis. So that's the reason why, in the framework of the festivities at the end of June, the President has asked for a dialogue to take place, some convergence. It is important to have a discussion about the deep root causes. Then the second option is the transitional justice. We have to take into account the complexities of this issue, the geopolitical aspects, the geostrategy at local and international level. And we know that from a judicial standpoint, there is no efficient mechanism in place. And if we have a look at the international level, we can feel that many are hesitating. We've had an advocacy work in New York before the Security Council or before other bodies. And of course, those are advocacy works that we have conducted. We always have to take into account the fact that there are discrepancies of views within the Security Council. So it is important to have a transitional justice mechanism. But which one? We need to put forward a mechanism that can be adapted to the Congolese situation. So we strongly believe that it's important to go for a reconciliation, so that we can have internal discussions, so that we can address identity crises. It is important for us to address geopolitical questions, and we really have to do away with all those frustrations. But we cannot think about the peace in the DRC if we do not take into account the sub-regional dimension. It is important to include this sub-regional dimension. We need to open this debate with the neighboring country, and by and large with the international community, so that we can really reach a sustainable peace, thanks to which we can really speak of reconciliation and we can reach the stability of the region. And this will be extremely beneficial for the development of the region. So, of course, trying to solve those issues using the military approach is not a good thing. And if we do this, we will only be solving some ad hoc problems. or problems that are only endemical. And so for the Church, it is important to take into account the holistic dimension. And I will end with this. This is also touching upon the identity question. This affects the civilization dimension, the strategy dimension. So this is what we say in our advocacy work. And I think that if we read the latest press releases from the Catholic Church, the content is also addressing this need to have a dialogue dimension, a holistic approach, a much more clever approach, so to say. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Eric, for this analysis. We understand that this is not only a security crisis, it has several dimensions, and a military answer will not be enough. And so, of course, it is important to address reconciliation, the dialogue with the neighboring countries, but I think that we will be able to come back on these questions a little bit later in the Q&A sessions. Now, I would like to continue, and I would like to address the potential solutions at local level, and I would like to focus on the non-violent initiatives aiming at strengthening peace and security in the DRC. So, dear Godefroid, non-violence is one of the fundamental values of your work in your NGO CADRE. Given your experience in this field, could you tell us a little bit more about the efficacy of the non-violent movements in the DRC? And would you be interested in knowing a little bit more about their successes and limitations and their role in promoting peace? The floor is yours. Thank you very much indeed, Megan. Given the time that I have at my disposal, I'm not sure that I can stick to the time if I have to answer all those questions. Would it be all right with you so that I can take a little bit more time? Yes, I can give you maybe 2 or 3 more minutes. So 13 minutes would be better than 10, I believe. Thank you. So, what is the efficacy of the non-violent movements in the DRC? Well, it has to do with the persuasion capacity. We need to focus on the commitments, and we need to preserve the moral values. I believe that it's important to have a dialogue. We need to live in peace and harmony with our neighbors. This is part of the non-violent strategy. The involvement of those non-violent movements is key. But of course, there's no coercion power from those movements. We simply try to convince, and we do not have the possibility to implement sanctions. Now, the role of the local and national initiatives. Their role is to take part in this process leading to sustainable peace at the national level, but also at the regional level. So this is what I can say to answer your questions. And if you allow me, I would like to address today's theme, towards a sustainable peace in the DRC, local and regional strategies when faced with the security crisis. A few words about the context to start with. I think that this webinar needs to be based on some consistency. If we want to put an end to the war in the country, we need to follow several pathways. Diplomacy first. The 49th session of the Parliamentary Assembly, which took place in Canada in July, early July, led to a resolution followed by many member countries. During the 49th session of this French-speaking Parliamentary Assembly, a major turn was taken with the adoption of a resolution that is condemning the presence of the Rwandan military in the country. More than 34 countries agreed and voted so that those troops could be withdrawn. And I would like to read here the statement that was made available in a video. As General Secretary of the Francophonie, I want to have peace, and I want my Congolese brothers and sisters to be able to live in peace. But of course, in order to achieve this peace, the various decisions that are made must be implemented by all. End of this statement. The second diplomatic event is a report of the expert groups of the United Nations on DRC. The conclusion of this expert report highlight how severe those violations are. Violations of the international humanitarian law, but also the continuous degradation of the current situation in the country. Third diplomatic event. A truce of humanitarian a humanitarian truce of 2 weeks had been announced, but according to the American press release, of course, it must be implemented by the various parties to the conflict. And so the idea would be to silence all the weapons. And it is important to provide an access to the humanitarian staff. This truce means that hostilities would stop. The DRC government, but also the government of Rwanda, expressed their support to this 2 weeks humanitarian truce. The idea is to alleviate all the sufferings of populations. The aim would be to create the conditions to have a de-escalation of this conflict. Talking now about the national and local strategies in DRC. The EurAc team is conducting an advocacy work, and it is important to support the Congolese leadership and to install a close collaboration with the various religious representatives in the country. I have in mind the cardinal, so that we can try and strengthen the national awareness of the national leaders. It is important not to betray the country. And it is also important to ban nepotism. As we are addressing the national and regional strategies, I would like to say the following. It is important to prolong the humanitarian truce announced by Washington to stop hostilities in the east of the country. This is really a key challenge. And this is a challenge for all of us. Second, in line with the 49th session of the Parliamentary Assembly, it is important to make sure that decisions are implemented so that we can really see a sustainable peace in the east of the country and make sure that Rwandan troops are moving away and are withdrawn from the country. Third, we should also set up a commission in charge of establishing a dialogue with the Rwandan authorities, the OIF General Secretary, the African Union, the European Union, and the United Nations Security Council to address peace and to make sure that the Rwandan troops can be removed from the country. Fourth, we also need to comply with the Nairobi agreements so that a sustainable peace can be promoted. 5, we also need to identify the perpetrators of all those crimes. 6, the repatriation of the refugees from DRC to Rwanda, civilians. And there we need the support of the United Nations. We could also refer to the MONUSCO or the SADC. 7, we need also to think about the repatriation of the Congolese refugees. Number 8, we also need to resort to the International Court, who could address those crimes. And this has been already documented in a report and the white paper we have. 9, a sustainable peace means also in the DRC means a sustainable peace in the neighboring Rwanda. We need to promote the dialogue between both countries. We know that the genocide took place in Rwanda and not in the DRC. And then, number 10, we need to suggest an action we need to take to court so that we can sue multinationals because they bought minerals in Rwanda. So this is the contribution I wanted to share with you and to make in this webinar. I think that we need to take into account the current context. It's extremely hard to assess the impact of the press releases. Of course, we know that the leaders are not necessarily reading those press releases. And it's important maybe to set up commissions so that we will be able to meet with the interested persons. We need to think about the various international organizations. The advocacy work is also extremely important. And we need this advocacy work if we want to move towards peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Godefroid. You explained the strengths, but also the limitations of such movements. And you also started the reflection on how we as civil society, we can support such initiatives through a certain number of recommendations, which I'm sure will be very useful in the follow-up to this webinar. I would like to stick to this question of non-violent initiatives and give the floor to Sister Angèle. Caritas Bunia has a number of programs aimed at educating and promoting non-violence within communities, especially amongst young people. Could you tell us a little more about these initiatives and their effectiveness and limitations? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the floor and explaining to you what we are doing with young people and people having difficulties in the field. Sorry, but there are different microphones on at the same time. Sorry, but I can hear different microphones open at the same time. Okay, I think it's okay now. It should be okay now. Please, you can continue. Thank you. Regarding the situation in the eastern part of the country, the situation is very dramatic, very difficult. So in the eastern part of the country, we have a series of recurring armed conflicts and inter-community violence. And conflicts between rebels and different armed groups. But this crisis is the result of different armed groups. We have the local ones, and then we also have foreign power groups. M23. We also have ELERA, ADF in the north, in the Garamba Park. ADF is also present in the north of Kivu and Ituri. Then we also have another group in especially the Mbororo in the north. And they are also, they have also done a lot of atrocities in the eastern part of the country. And in this framework, the population cannot live peacefully. They are displaced, they have to leave their environment of origin, they have to move, they have to flee. So the situation from a humanitarian point of view in the eastern part is terrible. And the way in which things are going is the same. So the situation in the eastern part of the country is the same. In the north, the center, and the eastern part of the country, people are always facing the same situation. We tried to find, to identify the root causes of this, especially in the eastern part of the country. And the bad governance, a lack of governance is at the origin, is one of the causes of this multiplicity of armed groups there. young people have nothing to do, they have no work. So they are there and they are attracted by those groups of rebels. Then we also have inter-community conflicts. So it's the use, instrumentalization, as we say, of this idle youth, and also ethnic and national rivalries. Also the policy of occupation, as we call it, the Balkanization of Congo by foreign powers. So the country is so big that we have to share it, to divide it. Then also the complex interplay of geopolitics. Father Godefroid already talked about that, the multiplicity of these armed groups. Then also proliferation and overlapping of local and foreign armed groups. We also have exceptional natural resources, a lot of minerals, a lot of natural resources. And that's why people are doing such atrocities just to be able to steal this richness. But we also have other reasons for this crisis, especially in the eastern part. There are challenges there at a geopolitical level. And the first one is the absence of a clear political vision for the country's development. So political violence, unique or one-track thinking, violations of rights and freedoms, failure of the three branches of government, and low level of citizens' participation. Then we also have economic problems. There are a lot of problems ranging from the state's capacity to collect public revenue and to ensure the distribution of national wealth, as well as to guarantee an environment that could lead to economic growth and development. And this, as a result, an exacerbation of poverty. Then security, poor protection of people and property encourages crime, rape, insecurity. And also the fact that law enforcement and security services are led and dominated by the rulers. At social level, also, we have a lack of basic social services, and people again are exposed to vulnerability. And also the fact that there is a spillover of such harmful effects to neighboring countries, which leads to a regionalization of conflicts and humanitarian, political, and economic crises, as in the Great Lakes region. Even displaced people are suffering from the consequences of this crisis. Attacks go civilian and a lot of civilian casualties. Illnesses are very frequent. People lose their life, then serious injuries and mutilation of children and adults. Also, education and health facilities are burned, as well as homes. Trauma, children living in the streets, and they live in poverty, in misery. Also, a lot of displacement, massive displacement of the population to safer areas. Although the war-displaced people have abandoned everything, their villages, houses, fields, and any type of possession, they are going to sites where they should be protected. But this was not the case, because it has been bitterly observed that they have been massacred several times in their refugee camps, like Drodro, Woolly Plain, Savo, Lala, and Jaiba sites. A lot of them were children, older people, people who were ill, chronically ill, and they have been the victims of these massacres, whereas they should have been protected there. In Ituri, we have a lot of people who were killed. Fortunately, there were answers from the security service. But as I said, a lot of victims are children, disabled people, the elderly. So they were the genuine, the real victims of such killings in centers where they should have been protected, in displacement centers. We also have statistics. As you can see here, in June 2024, this is the number of displaced persons. We have sites that should be managed by CCCM. And as you can see, 277,229 people are living there under the CCCM mechanism. In sites which are not managed by CCCM, we still have 61,361 people, which represents 13,469 households. Then we also have people who were displaced in foster care. And here we have a lot of people, as you can see, living in such foster care situations. So the total number of people living there in organized or non-organized sites is 1,391,695 people who are displaced and living in such centers. In the different territories or provinces, we also have statistics of displaced people. 277,229 people as a whole living there. We also have to talk about the rotation of armed groups. What do we mean by rotation? We mean the multiplicity of armed groups in the DRC. And this means that the crisis is never over, because some things are settled and others are being born. So it's a vicious circle formed around the crisis, and it's like a football game. The same military or militiamen are moving around freely with guns blazing in the area, and well-equipped and dressed in the same uniform as loyalist soldiers. But who is a loyalist soldier and who is not? We also identified a few operating modes, and operating methods are the same in all the areas where atrocities are committed. The victim's throat is slit, the victim is decapitated, buried alive, burnt alive. The victim is bound, tortured, and shot. The victim is burned alive in the house. Victims are raped and their private intimate parts are cut off, or the victim has been dissembled. So where is the respect for life, for human life? At the invitation of the Congolese government and in cooperation with the humanitarian coordinator, several United Nations agencies, international and national organizations have provided emergency aid to vulnerable people in the eastern part of the DRC. But unfortunately, the period of atrocities has lasted for more than 6 years. And all the resources and packages are empty, are exhausted, and they cannot continue to provide this emergency aid. And, people cannot travel more than 5 kilometers in search of survival. And the majority of the displaced people are those who live from agriculture and livestock. So I have a few pictures to show, but as a conclusion, I wanted to show the multiplicity of these militia who occupy the eastern part of the country. So a few images here. So these are the places where displaced persons are living. You can have a look at their conditions. And the mothers are those who suffer the most because their loved ones are living in very poor conditions. You know, houses of 1 to 2 square meters. It's cold, it's raining inside. When it's hot, it's really unbearable there. They are just sleeping on the ground, and they all live together in this small house, or the very small square meters. So this is very painful. Here, this is the suffering of the people, of the children. What is the mother doing, or what are the children doing to be punished like that? Their houses are burned. You see the Red Cross here just to pick up corpses, and so this is really very difficult to see. And there are images that I did not want to show to you because it's too much. It's too much suffering, and until today, this is what happens. As you can see here, this is in sites which are organized or managed, but in other sites, there are no houses, no roof, nothing. So Caritas tried to build tents to offer a shelter to displaced people who had to abandon their house. So you see here the different houses with straw, so it's so difficult for them to live. They had to abandon everything, and they are there, they are living there. Then other images of killings. This is what remains of the country, of the eastern part of the country. So this is what is happening there with people who had to leave the place to go there. And you say, as I told you, these people have been tortured, children, grandparents. So these are images that create a lot of suffering, of pain. So, you know, and people react, they have killed my loved ones, so I have to do the same. And atrocities will continue if awareness raising and peaceful initiatives are not continuing. So we want peaceful cohabitation. We want peace. Peace has to win over suffering. We cannot kill people as if they were animals. So raising awareness campaigns are sometimes risky for us and for those who accompany this type of initiative, because you are there to announce things that are hurting. Because a lot of people have lost their parents, their loved ones. So what you are saying is sometimes difficult to hear, but we want the government to do what it has to do. The protection of the people is part of the government's responsibilities. The government has to do everything so that peace would come back in our country, in the DRC. Sorry to interrupt you, but we still have another intervention. So it's very, very interesting, very interesting. Yes, let me just conclude. by saying that as long as weapons will be in the hands of young people, it will be difficult to talk about a sustainable solution, because the displaced population should go back home and do something else with their life. So that's what I wanted to tell you about the situation in the eastern part of the country. And that's what we are doing every day in the field. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. And I'm sure that there will be many questions asked to you on your awareness raising work. And I would like to stress the role of women also in this pursuit for peace. And we know that they are most of the time the victims. They account for the majority of those who are displaced. They are excluded. They are the victims of violence. And so in this context, it is really difficult to understand why women are so excluded from peace initiatives. Now, Passy, I would like to turn to you now. AIDPROFEN advocates the active involvement of women in community and political life and in the promotion of peace. Could you tell us a little bit more about the specific impact of the conflict on women and their role in the pursuit of peace and stability? The floor is yours. Thank you very much indeed. Megan, thank you very much to my predecessors who already talked about the context and the crisis affecting the region and the country here, the east of DRC. Now, the impact of the conflict on women. I have to say that the conflict has had an impact on women in different ways, different levels. From a social standpoint, economic standpoint, so at all levels. We felt that women had really been impacted. I am not going to come back on what happened many years ago, but as we all know, the last 2 years have not been easy. Because of the rebellion of the M23 that started many years ago. From a social standpoint, we saw that because of this war, there's been a massive displacement of populations. And so that's the reason why many men and women must now live in camps, not far away from Goma and from those theaters of the war. And so because of all those displacements, of course, there are many risks linked to the gender-based violence. And when I'm speaking of gender-based violence, there are several types: rapes, sexual assaults, physical aggressions, forced marriages, just to mention a few. And we have also observed that because of those displacements, there's been a lot of exposure to cases of abuses, sexual exploitations of children, but also of women who must provide for a living to their families. And we also saw a practice of a kind of survival sex. So it means that for $1, 2,000 francs, some women must resort to a sexual relation to have some money so that they can buy food. And of course, this is totally unacceptable. We also know that sometimes women are raped when they go out and collect woods, but they still go there because it's the only way for them to provide for a living to their families. So the social impact is the one that I have just described. Now, psychologically speaking, when I speak with those women living in those camps, sometimes, they have lost hope because they see the situation, and the Reverend said so. Actually, the government is sticking to its position when it comes to the military dimension. We are peace builders, and we really have to find a solution, especially when we see the consequences of those conflicts and the impact on civilians, be it in the DRC or in the region, in Uganda, in Burundi, and of course here as well in the DRC. Now, economically speaking, I have to say that the city of Goma, where I am right now, is suffering so much because the city is surrounded by several territories, the Nyiragongo territory, the Masisi territory, and you know that those cities have been occupied for many months by the M23, and we have Rutshuru and Masifiki, a large territory. They are actually supplying the city of Goma with foodstuffs. And so the situation is extremely dire, especially for women. Now, from a political standpoint, I'm not going to recall here that all those regions that were occupied or that are still occupied by the M23, men living in those areas were not allowed to take part in the elections. And this is extremely severe because this is a right, this is a civic right. And unfortunately, they were deprived of this right. And it contributed to the increase of tensions in the region. Now, the role of women now. It has been said already. We know that in most of the cases, women are the first victims of war. Unfortunately, when there are peace negotiations going on, most of the time, women are excluded from those negotiations. In AIDPROFEN, we try to conduct an advocacy work to make sure that women have a say. And we do this at several levels, at local level, but also at the national level. We have conducted several advocacy tasks, and we try to bring women together. This is extremely important. They need to be involved in those peace-building mechanisms in the region. But as you know, there are several mechanisms in place now in the region, but they are not efficient. So, in my opinion, it would be important to think about, well, I do not know whether I can speak of new ones, new mechanisms, because the ones that are in place have not been useful. And I think that the major problem here is that, it's a political problem. The Congolese government is not willing to negotiate with the rebels. Well, this is something I can hear. But then, why wouldn't it be possible to negotiate knowing that we have so many people who are suffering? Those who went to the east and now they are living in those camps. There is so much suffering there, and I think that the military option has failed. With the military option, we saw that unfortunately it was not possible to find solutions because, of course, those countries are accusing one another. Some wanted to collaborate with the RLFPR or the M23. So we see that there is some hypocrisy. And because of that, People are not willing to make the most to find a sustainable solution for the benefit of the populations at the national level or even at international level. You know, sometimes I am really wondering whether international solidarity is still a thing, be it at the level of the United Nations or at the level of the European Union. We have the feeling that there is a kind of Congo fatigue. This is an expression that we have heard. But of course, we see that there are thousands of people who are suffering in those camps. They are literally dying. Just 2 days ago, a bomb fell and killed civilians. Just 2 days ago, and before that there was also a bombing in another camp that killed close to 35 internally displaced persons. So this is a real bloodshed, and of course this affects women, and this situation must stop. What we need is a dialogue. Of course, we know that countries have economic interests. When we think of what we have here in Congo, when we think of the resources we have here in the country, but when it comes to women, it is important to go beyond those interests. Just imagine those women who saw their children being killed, men who saw their wives being raped just before their eyes. This is just awful, and this creates a trauma. So I think that transitional justice must play a role here as well. And what can we do with the memory, with the past? Because those situations will still have dire consequences in the future in the region. And I think that with the neighboring countries in the region, we share some history, and this history will follow us. So we have to live together. We need to find a way to coexist. And it's important to improve the involvement of women at several levels in the country. So we try to work with them, we try to work with youngsters, we try to help them develop a critical thinking. This is also true for women. It's important for them to know how to fight manipulations, because of course there are many cases of identity-related manipulation. And so unfortunately the conflict is going on. And unfortunately, in spite of all the actions, in spite of all the efforts made by women, unfortunately, they remain very excluded from the peace talks. It's only a handful of women who can really participate. So we continue with the advocacy work, because it is important for the resolution 1325 to be implemented when we think of prevention, protection, awareness raising. It is so important for women to be able to take part in the negotiations. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Passy, for this reflection. Of course, we are slightly lagging behind our schedule, so I think that we can now move on to the Q&A session. You know that on your Zoom screen, you can also write down questions. We have received several questions, but I think that there is a first one in reaction to your intervention, Eric. Pascal wrote that the political option has shown its limitations. We clearly see that there is an increasing number of internally displaced persons. So reconciliation, dialogue is really the solution. I think that we all agree on that. There's been another question for everyone. The efforts made by religious leaders are sometimes limited, and sometimes political leaders do not think that dialogue is a solution. So we clearly see that there are, in some instances, a total lack of political willingness. So what can we do as a civil society to find a positive outcome? I do not know who is willing to answer this question, or maybe you can try to answer, all of you. Eric, to start with. So the first question, yes, we insist, of course, on the diplomatic solution, as I said, and there are several dimensions in a possible solution. So what can we do? There is a trust crisis. There is a crisis of confidence here. So what do? Well, we try to establish and to continue the dialogue with the authorities. Well, it's not that they do not understand, it's not that the authorities do not understand, but I think that several approaches have been suggested. They all had their own objectives, and there's been a kind of mixture between them. And we see that sometimes the initial data are no longer in place. As I said, leaving the EAC and resorting to the SADC. This led to a strong militarization, and I'm sure that you have followed the expert report, pinpointing at Uganda as well. And of course, the Congolese government is not willing to confront directly with another government from a neighboring country. So it's important to restore trust and confidence. First and foremost, trust must be restored at the local level, between local players. As I said earlier on, there is a lot of frustration. And the reasons behind those crises go way beyond what we saw at the very beginning of this war. We saw the outcome of the 2023 elections. There has been also cases of misappropriation of public money. So now there are additional dimensions. And of course, this is weakening the collective commitment on this question. And I think that this should, in theory, be a national cause. So the fact that war is no longer considered to be a national cause, we see that there are several new claims now. So our approach here is really to discuss with the authorities and to obtain a framework for the establishment of a dialogue. This is extremely important. Of course, I know that there is this debate about the outcome of the elections, and I don't think that we should enter this debate because we would create additional problems there. The idea is to have a proper analysis and to stick to the security issues. The second dimension relates to the sub-regional level. The Protestant Church has continued the dialogue with our brothers and sisters, and I think that it's important to have a direct communication channel with the interlocutors, with the key protagonists in those countries. And then, thirdly, what we need is an accurate commitment from the United Nations Security Council. And so we believe that it would be possible to reach a solution if we take into account those dimensions.
Thank you very much, Eric. I would like to stick to this question on actions taken by the civil society organization. So, Angèle, I don't know if you want to react, if you have ideas of what civil society could do in such a framework where the government does not give a lot of room for maneuver, and where it seems that a lot of initiatives are being blocked. The civil society, to me, is the voice of the people, and this voice has to continue to express itself in front of local or national authorities, because it is through the civil society that the people are listened to. So civil society has to be brave and stick to this appointment with the government to voice the call of the people and to make sure that this is the relay of the people. I have a question for you, Passy, a direct question. Do you have examples of challenges for women activists in peace, working for peace? And are there actions to meet or to take up those challenges? Yes, there are different organizations in Goma who work around the issue of peace promotion. Saout Yamaman Kamangi, Cafe, AIDPROFEN, and others. They conduct different actions, especially advocacy actions amongst decision makers and authorities, and they have taken part in discussions and dialogues around Nairobi. So the participation is still very low, unfortunately. We only have a few people taking part in the process. There is a kind of exclusion, or let's not say exclusion, but let's say that they participate less, to a lesser extent. But there are a lot of community-based actions, for instance, demonstrations organized by women regarding the fact that human rights are violated here in the region. So different demonstrations have been organized by women, are conducted a lot of actions here at local level or in Kinshasa. And we highlighted the crisis, the fact that there was an over-militarization here that exposed women a lot on gender-based violence. So we have organized awareness-raising actions at the level of the province and the local authorities. We have to make sure that women are taking part in the decisions. With the first nomination of a woman as a minister, it is to us a very good step in the right direction. As long as there are going to be conflicts in the region, women are the first victims, and they will continue to raise their voice. In Congo, at a European level, at the United Nations level, women are coming together to find a solution. Thank you very much. Godefroid, I have a question for you. During your speech, you talked about the OIF Parliamentary Assembly, and you refer to the decision made by this assembly. Do you think that such initiatives can change the way in which security is organized, or do you think this can be a changing point? Thank you very much for the question. It's the very first time that we have a forum where Rwanda is being accused, and Rwanda commits itself through the General Secretary of OIF commits itself to continue and to implement the decisions made, so to really turn words into practice. This is, for us, a sign of hope regarding the withdrawal of the Rwandan armed forces from the Congolese territory. M23 will be considered as a Congolese armed group in line with the different agreements, the Nairobi Agreement. Can I continue in English, or? Yes, you can do as you want, English or French. Thank you very much, Godefroid. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left. So I propose we take a very last question, and we will keep all the questions raised and written in the chat so that we can answer to them later. I'd like to ask a question to Sir Angèle. You are working in the field, you have witnessed the consequences of insecurity on the people themselves. How are people perceiving those conflicts, and what is their opinion on non-violent approaches to put an end to these conflicts? Thank you very much for your question. So what would be the vision of our community, of the community at large? First, I'm thinking of the people who are facing the very consequences of the war, of the displaced people also. First of all, they would like to go back home in their regional area of origin. They would like to do as they did before, back to normal. Women would like, of course, or recommend security to be guaranteed. Weapons have to be put together, and they have to be taken away, because weapons, of course, are leading to violence and atrocity, and weapons are everywhere. So they have to be put together, brought together. Women are messengers of peace, but this, and only if peace would be guaranteed and atrocities would stop. So that's the only thing I can tell you to answer this question. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thanks to all our panelists, and thank you for all the questions raised in the chat. It shows that it is necessary to have this type of conversation and continue to discuss together. To end, we would like to show to you the initiatives taken by EurAc and PCI to support this advocacy work. Marta Inés Romero already talked about that in the introduction, so I'm going to focus on EurAc. Those of you who don't know us, we are a network of more than 30 European NGOs working closely with civil society in the Great Lakes region to support their efforts towards peace and stability. Our main mission is to lobby the European Union and its member states and decision makers. And this is what makes our network very strong, because we have a diversity of members and members' expertise, but also an ability to combine our efforts to maximize the impact of our work. And it is important that we always strive to have a balanced approach and understand the dynamics of conflicts and their potential solutions from a regional perspective, with a primary objective, which is to protect populations and civil society. Since the beginning of the year and the clashes between M23 and the Congolese armed forces, we have carried out advocacy work to alert key EU decision makers to the urgency of the situation and the risk of destabilization on a regional scale, because we think that EurAc has an important role to play in supporting the restoration of peace and stability in the Great Lakes region. The communiqué has been published in March, followed by a briefing note with a number of recommendations. In particular, it calls for an end to all military cooperation with Rwanda and for a resumption of negotiation of efforts that have to include civil society, because this is a player that we consider indispensable if lasting solutions to the crisis are to be identified. Through webinars such as the one of today, we continue to fuel our advocacy work and identify ways of working together to achieve greater impact at local, regional, and international level. Informing and alerting are the two main missions of civil society. That's why it seemed important to us today to shed light on this security and human crisis, while trying to identify together the prospects for a resolution. In this spirit, I give the floor to my colleague Julia, who will explain what follow-up actions we are planning after this webinar.
Thank you, Megan. And yes, I would like to take the opportunity to not only going towards the closure of this webinar, but also to remind that we created this webinar together with EurAc. We are glad to be their members and to be able to not only develop these activities together, but to continue the advocacy effort and also the coordination and cooperation with other organizations, yes, in the European Union, but also around the world and especially in the region. For the next steps, we would like to not have this webinar only as an exchange of thoughts and words. We really want to have some actions developing after this. So we are envisioning to develop an advocacy action together. We will brainstorm a little bit on the outcomes of this discussion. We collected your questions. We will also provide answers to those questions, but we will use those answers also to increment a bit more the work that we want to develop all together. So I kindly ask you to stay tuned, to follow us, to stay up with us, because we would really like to have you involved in this effort and to have you on board in the dissemination, in making this voice stronger. So I'm going now towards the conclusions. I want to thank all of you, both the speakers, those that intervened, that shared their reflections, for being here. I believe that it's very important to have your voice here and to have the possibility to underline what's happening in the DRC. We see that the news, of course, are always very quick, very rapid, and often they dismiss many important events that are happening, and especially they dismiss the voice of the people that are suffering and to those that are actually doing something positive. So with this webinar, we don't only want to share like a spotlight on the situation, we would like also to underline the positive effort that the speakers here today, but also the people that are there in the DRC are developing right now for non-violence and for a path towards peace. So we hope that this is just one of the many steps that we can implement together for achieving this. I saw Marta Ines, if you want to say a few words, no? But Marta Ines has always very kind words, and she's also very capable every time to share reflections and serious thoughts. But I want also to thank all of you that joined today, that were there listening, that share questions, and I hope, yes, that we can collaborate in the future. So thank you very much to all of you, and we stay in touch for the future step of our work together. Thank you. Merci à vous, Sœur Angèle.
Thank you, Julia.